Hey, Pastor Josh here. We're reading Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. We're now going to look at day 2 of creation. Day 1, God created light, He created darkness, and then He separated it one from another. Day 2, we're going to see Him create the sky. And so the first 3 days of creation, there's a lot of separation that's going on. God creates and then He divides. And as we look at day 2 in particular, I'm going to point out that that's a lot of what we do as created beings in the image of God. Remember, humanity, humans, we are the only ones that are made in the image of God. We are made in the likeness of God. And part of what we do is that we divide. We decide what is right. We decide what is wrong. And we have to intelligently, through the Spirit's help, decide what is right, what is wrong. What should I be focusing on? What should I be ignoring? What should I be putting my hand to and working on? And what should I put off for another time? There's a lot of division going on in the first 3 days of creation. And if we're honest, that's what we're spending a lot of our time doing, is making decisions on what it is that we should be focusing on. We're dividing, we're separating things out. So let's look at day 2 creation in particular. And God said, this is a attitude for us to change. God speaks. That is how He brings about change. That's how He brings about creation. That's how He works, is through making. Now, I'm making the stance in Genesis 1:1. If you've not watched the previous video, you can watch that. But I'm making the stance that Genesis 1:1 is a creation of the matter. It's a creation of all this goobly gop. Essentially, it's a chaotic mess. It's without form and void. God creates that stuff, and then on day 1, then He begins to create light and begins to move that. Now, we're not told that He speak that into existence or what, but He did create that. But everything else, day 1 through day 6, it is God speaking and making these things happen. He is speaking, and that's how He moves in our life today, is through His Word. And we have His Word, don't we? We have it in the Scriptures. That's why you're reading this. That's why you're listening to me and you're doing the reading plan. That's why you come to church. That's why you go to your Sunday school class, because you expect God to create new things in your life. You expect God to work in your life and in your heart through His spoken word, and we're given that, and we get to come to that and experience that. So just think about this. Every time that you open up the Bible, even as we do these read-through plans, every time that you look at the Bible, every time that you read it, you are going through a creative act for your own soul, your own spirit. You're submitting yourself to the creative God, letting Him speak to you through His Word in the way that He chooses to bring about creation. So God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. There is a command to obey. God said, let there be. What is it in your life that God is saying, let there be? What is it that you're maybe saying no to, that you know it's a command that's coming your way? You say, no, I'm not going to do that. What is it that God's saying, let there be? What steps is He asking you to take? Command that He's given to you, and you're choosing not to really obey Him and do it. Let there be. God gives us commands through His words. And notice, in the creation account, when God speaks and says, let there be, every single time, there is something that comes into existence. There is response from creation, because He speaks and He lets it be. Now, why is it that us that are made in the image of God, when God gives us a command, we do not respond in the way that we're supposed to? We don't respond obediently to Him. So be sure that you're obeying, not just hearing the words of God. The words of God are useless to you if you don't obey them, follow them, and make them a part of your very soul and your very being. So God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. If you remember, when God created, in verse 1, we're told in 1:2 that the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. There was this waters, this deep, gobbly goop stuff, whatever it was, matter there. And we're told that the Spirit of God hovers over the face of the waters. Then he created light, and then he separated the light from the darkness. And now he is now interacting with this watery mess, this watery matter. And he creates what the ESV calls heaven, what could also be called sky. I think that would be, in our modern day, would probably be a better thing to think of, is that God is creating this expanse. He's creating this division from the gobbledygook waters above and then the waters below. So essentially what you can think of is, if we think of the earth, you think of, instead of there being land and water, it's just water. Then you have a division. You have the sky, everything that's air above, up until you get to the clouds. And then the clouds then would be the waters above. But in this situation, you would be picturing still a gobbledygook of waters over top, gobbledygook of waters below, and you got this division in between. So he separates the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. Again, God making a division. God saying, here is the separation that needs to happen. This is him organizing creation. And it was so. It's a promise for us to claim. When God speaks, when God gives you a command, he is going to give you the power to obey that command. And it was so. And God called. It's an example for us to follow. Remember, we are made in the image and likeness of God. And not only are we called to begin to differentiate and organize and define what is good and bad, or agree with God what is good and bad, do this organizational aspect, we're also called to name. We're also called to put labels on things. We see Adam doing that specifically with the animals in chapter 2 of Genesis. And so we have this ability to define, to look, to call, and to exercise authority over the things that God has created. God has commanded us to take dominion over the land. And God called the expanse heaven. I think I already mentioned that. I think a better translation would be sky, but we all understand when we say heaven, we're thinking, okay, everything up above. Theologically, technically, heaven would be the place where God is. That is his abode. But then also, we will say, I looked up into the heavens, in saying that we looked up into the sky. So on day 2, it's not that God created the heavenly place. No, that place was already created. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created all of that up there before he initiated the day 1, day 2, day 3 of creation. So called the expanse sky, called it heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. Now, what is lacking in the day 2 creation is that there's no mention that it was good. Of course, God doesn't say it was bad, but he does not say that it was good. And that's because the division that's going to carry on with the sky is going to continue on with the waters, is going to continue on into day 3, and then he's going to divide the waters underneath the sky from the land. And then God will then say it is good. Remember, God is a creative, progressive God. He creates things, and he is always making it better and better and better. That is what the Lord does. Now, I tell you, I didn't mention this in previous video. I probably should have. So there'll be some people that will say, hey, since Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. Some will say, well, God created the earth and there was this whole other world and things that happened in between verses 1 and 2. That's sometimes called the gap theory. I don't find any validity to that, but I do think the right way for us to think of Genesis 1, 2, and 3 is to think that God then first created matter. It was unorganized, and then in day 1 he begins to organize it, separate it, create light and darkness, and all the various things that we are going to see. Pray that has been a blessing to you, and I'll see you all in the next video.